What's up, guys? Hope you guys have all been doing very well. Welcome back to another video. Now today we are going to be debating what exactly is the watch that hits all the markers for the perfect first luxury watch. As far as me, for my criteria, it's got to have a rich history. It's got to be mechanically sound. To be honest, it has to be at a reasonable price given kind of like its level in the luxury market. I have found one. Well, I didn't find one, but it's been on the market for a long time. It's none other than the Omega Seamaster. This thing hits all the bases. I have actually reviewed one of the newer, more modern Seamaster models, one with the ceramic and the coaxial movement. I'm gonna leave the video kind of somewhere up here and also leave the link down below. The option that we have here today is a more classic example of the Seamaster. This is one that dates back to the 90s. So what I'd suggest you do is check out the new one, check out the old one, and then next week's video is gonna be a comparison between old school versus new school. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe, do all that jazz, yada yada. So back to the point. Today's watch is essentially the grandfather of the ceramic model that I mentioned just moments ago. In my opinion, it's the earliest, most relevant Seamaster, if that makes sense. We're going to dissect everything about this watch. We're going to go through its history, its technical specs. I've already covered the history of the Seamaster in decent detail, so I'm going to leave, like I said, the link to that video down below if you're interested on the full breakdown of the history of the Seamaster. We're going to go through a very brief Cole's notes, and then we're going to move on to looking at the watch at my desk. So without further ado, we're going to move on to the history of the Seamaster. So the Seamaster is a long, diverse, and complicated line of watches dating back to the 1950s and some even earlier. It's a story so long that, to be honest, it does warrant its own video, but here's the Cole's notes on everything you need to know. This is a story that begins in 1993 with the original Seamaster Professional. The reference number was 253.80.00. This was a watch that took instant popularity. It had an ETA 2892 based movement with the caliber 1120, and it had that iconic wave blue pattern that made it instantly recognizable. 5 years later, it was upgraded to the coaxial 2500, which made use of the Daniels coaxial escapement made by famous English watchmaker George Daniels. Omega had just gained the rights to this, and the escapement was meant to reduce wear and extend service intervals, although this wasn't a full upgrade, as many of the parts were not actually manufactured as intended because Omega had not yet streamlined their manufacturing process. But perhaps what played the biggest role in the success of this watch was Hollywood. Pierce Brosnan, notorious for his role as James Bond, first wore this watch in 1995's GoldenEye. It was a quartz, although they did upgrade it later to the automatic version. The swap from Bond's regular use of Submariners was actually thanks to production designer Lindy Hemming, who wanted Bond to be dressed up with an Omega, having been familiar with their long history with the Royal Air Force and naval operations. It was a watch that was much more well suited for someone fighting evil villains. Many generations and redesign later, we've come to what... All right, this is the reference number 2531.8. Now, sadly, this is not the exact one Pierce Brosnan wore in GoldenEye. Surprisingly, he actually wore the quartz model, and you can tell it's quartz because it doesn't say chronometer on the dial as this one does. Sorry to disappoint you guys who are looking to replicate the exact swag that Pierce Brosnan had in the GoldenEye movie. He wore a quartz one. In my opinion, quartz is garbage. Quartz is for losers. However, it is slimmer. It is a bit of a lighter watch, so I kind of see the appeal. It's also cheaper, obviously, because it's quartz, and quartz is crap. I would stay away from the quartz. I would go for the automatic, unless you're looking, unless having a watch that's a lot slimmer and thinner and lighter is very important to you. But I still think that nothing can replicate the kind of the authentic feeling of a live beating mechanical watch on your wrist. This model has also been replaced by the coaxial models, and they've slowly shifted away from the classic look into something more sleek and modern while still maintaining the general aesthetic. This watch in particular sits at 41.5 millimeters, measuring just under 12 millimeters thick, so it's already pretty slim enough. I see no reason for you to kind of downsize to the quartz and get the even slimmer model. It's 48 millimeters lug to lug. The lugs do stick out a bit. I'm not entirely sure how much, but it does seem kind of noticeable when you wear it. They kind of have like a little bit of protrusion right kind of in the center of the lugs. Not the biggest deal in the world, but just something to keep in mind if you have slimmer wrists. Now inside the watch, you've got the ETA 2892 based movement, which is also COSC certified. So this is an official chronometer as the dial suggests. Now the 2892, if you're not familiar, it's a very popular movement, a foundation for a lot lot of the Omega calibers, as well as many other big players in the luxury Swiss market. Just an all-around workhorse movement, very reliable, very mechanically sound, very robust. You're not going to have any problems with this mechanically speaking. And I'm not sure if it's just me, but I found this one was dying around the 39 to 40 hour mark, whereas I believe it's supposed to be in the mid 40s for the power reserve. I want to say it's 44 or 45. By my estimation, it was dying around the 40 hours. So it could be just a sign of age, but just something to keep in mind. There's a little bit of variability in the power reserve according to my own anecdotal example. Now, the sapphire crystal has anti-reflective coating and protects the beautiful and instantly recognizable wave pattern that has become signature Omega Seamaster. It's something I'm super happy with that they never got rid of right up until their very last models. On the newer ones, they actually expanded on this design principle and they used their more modern technology to get deeper grooves, and it really does take that Seamaster wave pattern dial and make it a lot more three-dimensional. It really does pop a lot more. So I'm very happy they decided to stick with this. They kind of shied away from it on the ceramic model. I'm super happy they brought it back. Although I am going to say, speaking of the crystal, I found it to be a little bit glary. I don't know if this is something to do with this specific model, maybe something with the anti-reflective coating, I don't know, production error, I have no idea, but I found it to be a lot more glary than other cheaper watches I've had with anti-reflective coating. So I don't know if this is an Omega problem or if this is this specific watch itself. I tried to capture it on camera, but it was actually a lot harder to do, believe it or not. Of course, as soon as I try to show you guys, the watch is just refusing to produce the glare it was producing just seconds ago. So I don't have any footage of the actual glare. It's not a big deal, but you do notice it from time to time in harsher light. It does actually kind of white out a couple of portions of your dial. Whatever. Now, the bracelet is the OG tank tread bracelet. It's a great mix of dress and sportiness with some polishing, brushing, and beveling. There's a huge love it or hate it thing going on with this bracelet, judging by my comments from the other video. Now, me personally, I love it. I just wish it wasn't as heavy of a bracelet, especially with the very substantial clasp with a double push deployment system. You can tell just by looking at it, it's a very chunky piece of metal. And while it definitely stops you from inadvertently opening your clasp, it does add a tad bit of imbalance to your wrist, in my opinion, although my wrists tend to be a little bit flatter, so could be because of that. Although I'm going to say I do appreciate how much space they've left in the tank treads. It really does avoid all sort of skin and hair pinching. Might not be a problem for some of you, but for some of us with a bit hairier arms and maybe some fatter wrists, we are going to appreciate not having our skin pinched every couple seconds. Now, the bezel is something they've done very well. It's anodized aluminum, very solid clicking. It sounds very good, works flawlessly. I found when it was wet, it worked pretty well, unlike the ceramic model, which was an utter slippery disaster to handle because of that smooth ceramic. This is something I'm going to dive into a little more when we do the comparison video next week, so I'm not going to get too much into it. Now, the best part about this watch is just how affordable it is. Relatively speaking, of course, price kind of ebbs and flows, but I've seen these drop to below around $2,000, and I think you should be able to pick one up in pretty good condition for around the 2,000, maybe even 1.7-ish mark. So the value is a check, the history is a check, the build quality is a check, the looks is a check. It's just the all-around perfect entry to the luxury market. And because it's old enough, you're going to be able to capitalize on the fact that it has depreciated a little bit while still retaining kind of that classic James Bond sporty, sleek, dressy look. So there you have it, guys. It's sleek, it's sexy, it's tough, it's beautiful, it's not overly expensive. If you're looking for your first luxury watch, this honestly hits all the bases. I know there's a love it or hate it thing going on with the Seamaster, but I find the hate generally comes from Submariner fanboys. We all love these watches. They're all fantastic. We love all watches except fashion watches. Now, on that note, guys, stay tuned for next week. We're going to be doing a full in-depth comparison between the modern Seamaster Professional and this classic example of the Seamaster Professional. We're going to see kind of how Omega has decided to evolve and step through the generations of Seamaster using their new technology and kind of how they've strayed, kind of what they've improved on, what they haven't improved on. So stay tuned for next week for that. But otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know how you find the Omega Seamaster Professional. And until next time, guys, take care.